Thank you, Dan, for that beautiful music. Welcome, everybody, to this special morning for us. We are so stoked to have Derek Stations of the Cross artworks to be able to enjoy and to share with people in our community and with you this Easter. And we hope this morning will be really special for you as Derek talks a bit more in depth about his artworks and shares with us. There's just a few little things that I highlight for people who come here regularly, just in case you're a bit confused as to what's happening over Easter. On this afternoon and Wednesday afternoon and Thursday afternoon, the art exhibition will be open at the same time as our ice cream business Kauri Cones is open. So if you've got friends or family who would like to see it, between 2 and 5 on Sunday, Wednesday and Thursday, it will be open to enjoy, and you can also have a real fruit ice cream if you like such things at the same time. And then on Thursday night at 8 p.m. here, we're going to have our service of shadows, which is where we think and reflect on Jesus' journey to the cross. And we're going to have it here and using the artworks to help us reflect. So that's on Thursday night at 8 p.m. On Friday, Good Friday, between 11 and 1, we have the art exhibition open again, but also a special Easter experience that will be in the pavilion that Siobhan is creating for us. So that will be a really special time between 11 and 1 on Friday. And then on Sunday at 10 a.m. we have our resurrection celebration, which will be very child-friendly also, because we have little gifty bags for kids to enjoy doing during the morning time, and we'll end with a resurrection feast. So come and enjoy that too if you're around on Easter Sunday. Now, David is just going to hand each table group and down here a little envelope, and in the envelope there's a set of Easter conversation starters, ways that you can share with the people around you your experiences of Easter, fun things, or whatever you want to share in answer to the question. So what you do is you open the envelope, you choose, each person at the table chooses a question that they would like to answer or that they think they've got something to say about, and then you just share that between you. And feel free to eat the food. It's there for you. So once everybody's had a chance to choose a question, say your question and share your answer. So just a minute to finish off conversation. Okay, let's draw together now. We're just going to have a little bit of time all together. Firstly, I just wanted to say something about the Stations of the Cross, because for some of you, this might be a new thing. For some of you, you might be very familiar with it. But I thought it would be good just to start and just reflect on what is the Stations of the Cross. It's a centuries-old tradition. So it's an ancient tradition, and it's a tradition of visually depicting the journey of Jesus on the Via Dolorosa, which means the way of suffering. And in its very origin, it would have been on the streets of Jerusalem, actually going along the route that Jesus was thought to have walked to his crucifixion, and stopping at each place and reflecting on what would have happened at that place. But over the centuries, it became something that people wanted to express in their own places that they lived. And so that's when the tradition of depicting each of the stations visually as artworks, that's when that started. And it's a tradition that goes into all the church groups right across Christian church culture. And each station represents a significant event. It's an event often recorded in scripture, sometimes in church tradition only. So an event that is remembered about what happened as Jesus walked that route with unwavering, resolute determination to confront death, to bring life. And stations are stopping points. So to really experience the Stations of the Cross is not just a quick whiz around visually looking. You're invited to stop at each station and spend a little bit of time in reflection. You're invited to consider your own life, your own circumstances, and what this station may have to offer you. And to help you do this, we have a booklet that's the exhibition guide. So if you haven't had a chance to go round, you may wish to use that to do that individually after Derek's talk, because he's going to enrich our understanding of these paintings. And reflecting in this way, we could call praying. It is really praying. It allows us to enter into Jesus' experience. And it also allows us to enter into the mystery of Jesus' gift to us. That gift is the transformation of suffering through love. So I'm going to hand over to Derek now, and he's going to share. Thank you, Derek.
Before this could be interesting. You'll have to just contort yourselves all through the morning, because I'm going to be wandering around all over the place. So do your best. If you want to stand up and walk around with me, you can do that as well. Just a couple of thank yous. Alison, thank you. This was all Alison's idea when she contacted me and said, could I resurrect, no pun intended, these paintings from last year. I happily said yes, because they've been clogging up the corner of my bedroom for the last 12 months. So good to clear the space. And Alison put together that lovely booklet that you've got, because that stuff I just can't do. Can I thank Simon, who put up all the rails in order for us to hang the paintings? I appreciate that, Simon. Minia helped with the lighting. Thank you, Minia. And Dan has provided the soundtrack to the exhibition, both digitally and in the flesh. So thank you, Dan, wherever you are. I'll do that. And of course, Lorraine and Roger always sort the food side of things out for us on these occasions. Thank you very much. Last year, it would have been probably February last year, my son-in-law, Edward, who, along with his family, lived with me, was contracted with a company that worked with New Zealand Rail, and he brought home a bunch of sheets of plywood, 24 by 1200 mil plywood, about 10, 12 mil thick, and because it might come in handy. I'm one of those, I'm like that. And it stayed stacked up against the side of the garage for a few months, and then the weather started to turn, and I wandered out there on the first day of Lent, which is Ash Wednesday, and I thought, what am I going to do with this plywood? And I got my tape measure out and I did a bit of calculating, and I figured if I cut out all the best bits of this plywood, I can get 15 paintings of this big. And then it crossed my mind that let's have a crack at the Stations of the Cross, which I was aware of, but had never really studied too closely. But anyway, so I thought that's what I'll do. I'll do a Stations of the Cross series of paintings. I wasn't even sure how many stations there were initially, but I did a bit of research, 14, that left one panel left over in case of disaster. Anyway, so I spent the next week cutting them all out, cutting the sheets up, gluing and nailing 2x1 backings on them all, and sanding and 3 coats of primer undercoat. And then I stacked them all up in my studio, and I wrote each station on the top edge of each painting. And then I looked at it and I thought, gosh, that's an awful lot of real estate I've got to cover. And I sort of calculated that I'd need another week at the end of the 6-weekish period that is Lent to allow the paintings to dry and to frame them. So that left 1 month to paint them all. So there was a sense of urgency about it all, and I got to thinking about paintings that were done under urgency, and the one that immediately came to mind was Picasso's Guernica. I don't know whether you're familiar with it. I mean, you will have seen it, but you may not know what I'm talking about just yet. But he painted it for the Paris Exposition in 1937, and he'd been commissioned to do this painting. It's a large painting. It's about 7.5 metres wide and 3 metres tall, I'd say. And I don't know whether he had something else in mind, but also in that year, 1937, the Spanish town in the Basque region of Spain was bombed by the Nazis, the town of Guernica. And Picasso, being Spanish, was outraged and decided to make his exposition painting the Guernica painting that we know today. And he did it in a month. And he was very clever. He had limited time and he limited his palette. It's basically black and white and variations of grey. And it's now housed in the Contemporary Art Museum, which is a converted hospital in the city of Madrid. And I've had the pleasure of seeing it, and a whole floor of that museum is dedicated to this one painting with all its attendant working drawings and so forth. And it's a pretty moving experience. It's a painting that is really about the horrors of war. And yeah, a pretty emotional experience to stand in front of a painting like that that sort of engulfs you and you almost become part of it. I had a similar experience years ago when I first saw Colin McCann's Victory Over Death, number 2. It's the big I Am one that you may have seen. And that was at Barry-Lett Galleries in Victoria Street, Wellesley Street, can't remember. And again, a large painting that took up most of the wall, floor to ceiling. And I stood in front of that, and it was somewhat overwhelming for me. Anyway, I digress. So sometimes, I guess what I'm trying to say is limitations can work in your favour if you sort of read the room right. And there's nothing more inspiring than a deadline. So it's good to give yourself limitations and to restrict yourself sometimes. This year marks 40 years since I made my first album. It was an album called Mixed Blessings, and we recorded it at Mascot Studios, which doesn't exist anymore. It was just off Great North Road in sort of Newton area, and that was the studio that Herbs recorded all of their early albums. It smelt like it too. And my producer for that album was a friend who had been the resident engineer at Mascot years prior and had engineered all those Herbs albums. So he was familiar with the place. Anyway, we recorded it in a weekend, and we mixed it the following weekend. And if I had to do that album again, of course I'd do it differently, but you've got to be able to look back 40 years and say, well, given the limitations, given the lack of budget, given the lack of musical skill by those participating, we didn't do a bad job, you know. And I hadn't listened, I don't even own a copy of it, but I think it's on YouTube, I think. Anyway, I sort of had a bit of a listen to it a while back, and yeah, I can still say some of those songs are okay. In fact, we played Festival 1 in end of January, and we had a set that was 8 songs long, and 4 of the songs were from that very first album. So, you know, I felt quite good about that. In the art world, the normal rules don't really apply, or they often don't apply. We live in a world where if you take your car to the garage to get repaired, you expect to pay more for it if it takes the mechanic 6 hours than if it takes them half an hour, right? Or if you buy a big house, it's going to cost more than a little house. That doesn't really work in the art world. The length of time that is invested in a painting doesn't necessarily determine its value. And the size of the painting doesn't necessarily determine its value. Years ago, there was an exhibition of Surrealism and Dada. Surrealism was a style of painting in the 30s, mainly in Europe, painting dreams and the subconscious, the Freudian subconscious, all that sort of thing. Salvador Dali and people like that, René Magritte. And at that exhibition, there was some very detailed, intricate paintings. There were some great big, huge paintings, but apparently the most valuable painting in the collection was a quick painted sketch that Picasso had done on the lid of a cigar box. It was a study for some bathers in the Surrealist style, and he'd also done some painting on the back of it. So it was displayed in a display case so you could see both sides. So the way we value the stuff in the material world doesn't always apply to art. And I know some of you probably struggle a bit with understanding modern art or abstract art or contemporary art. By that I mean art that's been made in the last 130 years or so, because you have to look at it with a different set of eyes than you might look at a Leonardo da Vinci painting or a Michelangelo sculpture or whatever. From the Renaissance on, there was just a real desire to try and create a high degree of illusion in painting, to make things appear to go back into space, as if you're looking through a window. But it is an illusion because a painting is just a two-dimensional flat surface. Along came people like Paul Cézanne, Pablo Picasso, Georges Braque, and they, along with concurrent science and medical understanding and perhaps psychological understanding, started to say, well, no, we don't see our world that way. We don't see it from a fixed viewpoint. We don't need to use illusion. We don't need to use things like linear perspective, which Brunelleschi developed back in the day. We don't need to use atmospheric perspective to make things appear to be further away from the eye. We need to perhaps make the painting start to come out from the surface rather than appear to go back from the surface. And colour does this anyway, warm colours on one side of the colour wheel, the colour wheel, don't you? You start with the primaries, red, yellow, blue, and then the next rim around them is the secondaries, when they get oranges and greens and purples, and then there's tertiary colours around that again. And the colours on the outside of the wheel, on one side, they'll be cool colours, blues, blue-greens. On the other side of the colour wheel, there'll be warmer colours, like yellows and oranges. And so those colours actually react to the eye. This blue at the top here, this deeper blue, appears to be further away than the warm-coloured one. But they're both sitting on the same surface. But warm colours appear to come toward the eye, cool colours tend to go away. So, I don't know how I got onto that, but from the Renaissance on, high degree of illusion, visual trickery, in a way. The modern artists started to see the painting as perhaps being its own reality. A painting can just exist as a painting. It doesn't always have to refer to another reality. In the same way, I don't go to that chair and say, what are you supposed to be? Are you an apple or a portrait or a still life? No, a chair's a chair, and we don't even question that. So a painting can be the same, it's a reality within itself. Needless to say, for these paintings, I didn't want to paint figuratively. I chose to be more abstract and to use symbols, which are nice and flat, crosses, arrows, crowns of thorns, halos. That'd be a good book, The History of the Halo. I'd buy it. How they changed throughout art history. And I thought I have to try and create some sense of unity, because it's really one work with 14 chapters. It's like one book with 14 chapters to it. So the work has to be unified. So the most obvious way to make the work unified is to make all the paintings the same size, which is blatantly obvious, I know, but that's one way of doing it. I used images and I divided up the space on the paintings the same way several times. For example, in this painting, I've divided this top quarter-ish of the painting, and if you're dividing something up, it's always more interesting if you have it a bit lopsided. If you divide it straight down the middle, the two sides cancel each other out. But if you compress one area, you sort of create a conversation or a relationship between the divided spaces. So this one here, which almost suggests a horizon and a sky, I repeat that where that far one, number 10, number 11, number 12. So that's one thing that some of those paintings have in common. I use this is you've got the 4 quadrants, but within it, you've got a cross, okay? And I do that all over the shop. Here, number, whatever it is, 7, 9, and that's it. I use the Tau cross, this cross shape here, which is a TAU. It's they call it a Greek cross. I think it's because its shape resembles the Greek letter I in the alphabet. I might be making that up. Check. Do your research. That gets repeated a number of times. What else? Yeah, so this is a way to try and bring some unity to the various images. I use oil paint, traditional oil paints, this stuff. I buy them 6 at a time. I buy titanium white, black, a cadmium red, a cadmium yellow, deep hue cadmium yellow, and a couple of different blues. And that's pretty much all I use. Now and then I'll splash out and buy some yellow ochre or some umbery colour or whatever, but with those 3 primary colours plus black and white, you can pretty much do anything. Just an interesting aside, if we didn't have paint and tubes, we wouldn't have got Impressionism, probably. Prior to the mid-19th century, you didn't have paint and tubes. You had to sort of have Wilson bottles of oil and thinners and pigments and a mortar and pestle, and your studio was probably a bit like a lab in order for you to concoct your colours. And so it wasn't very portable, but this made it possible to take your work and go and work on it outdoors in situ. Prior to that, painters like John Constable in England would go out and do hasty watercolour sketches and then take them back to the studio and do the main piece in the studio context. But with the Impressionists, were able to go out and complete the work in situ. Oh yeah, I use conventional oil paint. I mix it often with industrial enamels, oil-based enamels. I mix it with polyurethane. I'm not averse to using spray paint, road marking paint, shellac, which is an early form of varnish. This is shellac. All of those, this is all shellac. It dries real quick. It used to be made from a beetle's wing that you dissolved in a solvent. Now you just buy it in flakes, brown and orange flakes, and dissolve it in methylated spirits. And it dries super quick, which is great because most of the battle with oil painting is facing drying times, because oil paint takes an age to dry. So I'll often mix it with faster drying paints like enamels and polyurethanes, and I'll often add stuff to it like talcum powder, which sucks up the oil in the paint and makes it dry quicker. I'll put in sand, I'll put in tiling grout. I've put a lot of my wife's ashes in my paintings over the years. I haven't done it to any of these, rest assured, but she's all over the world. I'm running out of her ashes. I don't know what I'm going to do. I attach cloth to some of these paintings, muslin, hessian, denim. So that's the sort of technical overview, if you like. But let's just quickly go through each. I use sort of lots of industrial tools. I've got brushes. I do use brushes, but I also spread the paint with stuff like these nice flexible plastering tools. You can do a lot of damage with these. I use a lot of notched, tiling tools and things that pilers thread adhesive with and stuff like that. Very handy. So, let's just back up the truck a wee bit in terms of these paintings and acknowledge that today is Palm Sunday, and it's the day that we remember the moment when Jesus rode into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey or an ass to take part in the Passover celebrations. And in anticipation of his arrival, a bit of a crowd had gathered, and as he rode in, they cheered and waved palm fronds, crying, "Hosanna! Blessed is he who comes in God's name, the King of Israel." And these Judean Jews had very high expectations of Jesus. They were living under the shadow of Roman rule. They were living under a regime which was pretty brutal and pretty politically and morally corrupt. So these Jews saw Jesus as a political liberator, perhaps. But Jesus made no attempt to reform or to Christianize the Roman Republic, the Roman government. He did not lead a revolt. He did not establish a political movement. He did not align himself with nationalist zeal. He did not form a lobby group. Jesus' mission was to reconcile humanity to God and to establish a kingdom that advances not by force, but by grace. So I guess, given humanity's somewhat fickle nature, it is believable that in a few days' time, these same people who were cheering Jesus into Jerusalem are now screaming for his crucifixion. And we all know the story of the Passover feast. In the upper room, Jesus with his disciples, and he says that one of you will betray me. They go on to the Garden of Gethsemane on the Mount of Olives to pray. Judas rocks on up with some Roman soldiers and some religious leaders. They take him off. They take him off to the chief priest's house, and he gets grilled. And then they take him to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor. And then Pilate finds out that Jesus is Galilean, so that's not his jurisdiction. So he sends him off to King Herod, and he tries to entertain, is hoping to be entertained, but Jesus remains silent. Gets sent back to Pilate, and along the way, Jesus is mockingly dressed in a royal robe and a crown of thorns with a scepter, and sent back to Pilate, who literally and metaphorically washes his hand of the whole affair, releases Barabbas into the general population, has Jesus whipped or scourged, and then releases Jesus to the crowd, which brings us to number one here. And it's Jesus as a target. You know, the religious hierarchy had him in their crosshairs, metaphorically, for quite some time. He was no longer, a minor celebrity. His followers were becoming too much of a threat. And so I've done the target there. The suggestion is I think the top third or quarter idea that I had in mind was what's going on in the heavenlies while this stuff is happening below. I think that was in my mind. Anyway, I did that, and then I deliberately subverted the illusion by squirting black spray paint on it so it dribbled down into the lower space. When I was a student, I became a big fan of the painters Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg. They were two American painters who stood in the gap between the post-war movement of abstract expressionism, Jackson Pollock, William de Kooning, those are people. And they stood in the gap between those guys and who would later become the pop artists, Andy Warhol, those people. And Jasper Johns did a lot of target paintings. He liked the ideas of using symbols like flags, targets, that sort of thing, because of their flatness, but you could also communicate ideas with them. And I sort of explored this idea in a song. I haven't recorded it, but would like to sometime when my hand's performing a bit better. But I'll read you the lyrics. And it's called What Will Become. The singer takes the stage with a target on his chest, and he stands as fully naked before the great unwashed, undressed. And he sings it how he feels it, because he's straighter than a chalk line. The singer takes the stage, the canary in the coal mine. And he sings until he's breathless, and he plays until he bleeds, to bring us to our senses, to bring us to our needs. What will become of him? What will become of him? What will become of him? What will become? And the writer takes a pen and she holds it as a cudgel. The words you are afraid to say, don't worry about it. She will. And she writes it how she feels it, all her joys and deepest fears. The writer takes her pen, beating swords into plowshares. And she writes until she's wordless and the ink has all run dry. She rails against the darkness and opens up the sky. What will become of her? What will become of her? What will become of her? What will become? The painter eyes the canvas, a loaded brush his only weapon. He paints from his perspective, he don't care whose toes he steps on. He's the alchemist of colour, sometimes ash, sometimes quicksilver. Don't you buy it for investment, it might just fall off the wall and kill you. And he scratches and he scumbles, he gestures and he scrawls. Sometimes he's at his best when his back's against the wall. What will become of him? What will become of him? What will become of him? What will become? What will become? I don't know. What will become? I don't know. I don't know. Station 2. The way I've gone about these paintings is it's a combination of chaos and control, is how you'd best describe it. For example, if I was to paint this section, I would mask off this, I think, and maybe this, and then I would just drag the paint using these things, drag the paint across, and let it dry maybe, and rinse and repeat, several times until I get what I want. And so you've got sort of somewhat chaotic passage of paint sitting against areas that are a bit more controlled and masked off and geometric, if you know what I mean. That's kind of my approach. In this instance, this is Jesus taking up his cross. The steps are somewhat resemble the tukutuku panels that often decorate, the woven panels that often decorate the wharenui walls inside the wharenui. And it's my little effort to try and contextualise the stations in a New Zealand context, I guess you could say. It's no different to a lot of Renaissance crucifixions happen in an Italian landscape, an Umbrian landscape or a Tuscan landscape. It's no different to Paul Gauguin painting a Tahitian Madonna, and a Tahitian baby Jesus. It's just trying to say that this story applies to us too. Station 3, Jesus falls. There's no mention in Scripture of him falling, but the probability is very high. I think in the book that I explain my technique, but again, it's a cross is indicated by taking out the corners. And I just made a squeegee with heavy rubber on a bit of stick that was, I think, 500 mil high. And I put holes in the wood, and I put a nail hole in here. I can't see it. And I put a nail here, and then I'm working flat here, not upright, and I pour the paint along here, and I just drag it down to the stop point, so I can do it fairly quickly and gesturally. In this case, I think I probably used white enamel, and I've gone over it with this ochre to try and get that gestural idea of things falling. Often in paintings, you just do stuff because the painting requires it. Like, there's no meaning or significance in this red and this blue, except to say that red and blue are complementary colours. They sit opposite each other on the colour wheel. And when I say a complementary colour, this colour likes this colour so much that it tries to promote it. And this colour loves this colour so much that it tries to promote it. And sometimes if you get it right, they flicker, because they're saying, you go first, no, you go first, no, you go first. And it's not quite doing it there, but it's getting close. Station 4, again, this isn't mentioned in Scripture. Jesus meets his mother. We do know that Mary was at the foot of the cross. But in the station, he meets her along the way. This is a deep, deep blue, which is my attempt at duplicating the colour lapis lazuli, which was reserved solely for the painting of Mary's robe in Renaissance times. And that was because it was an expensive pigment to make. You took the semi-precious stone lapis lazuli and you ground it into a fine powder, and that formed the basis for the pigment. So I've done it there. And obviously there's the cross, the crown of thorns and the halos representing Jesus and Mary. How did you get those circles so perfect, I hear you saying? Well, I saw a 4-litre tin of metal primer, full, sitting on the floor of my studio. I thought, yeah, that's about the right size. I tipped it upside down, making sure the lid was on, and I put the paint around the bottom lip of the 4-litre tin, and I just put it on, did that. And then I used the tip of a chisel, dipped it in white paint, and went to get the thorns. That's how I work. What else can I tell you about this? There's some sort of plant form. I think it's supposed to be a lily. Down here, lilies are often associated with the Virgin Mary. And so we've got life represented on this side, and on this side, death. And again, a tower cross is a way of setting up that sort of idea of a conversation. Station 5, Simon of Cyrene helps carry the cross. This is the only painting that I revisited after I showed it last year. In these corners, I'd sort of tried to do this interlocking sort of fingers joiny sort of idea, but sort of geometrically, and it wasn't working. So I took it home and painted over it, and my grandson Kaya donated his hands. He didn't mind getting me painting them all over, and put those on there, and when it was dry, he came back and we did the other hands. Kaya, some of you know, he went in for surgery yesterday. He's had a tumour on his sort of jaw, cheek, and it wasn't cancerous, fortunately, and it's all been cut out and sorted out. And he's sitting at home with a face as big as a watermelon, but he's okay, so that's good. The idea for this painting was just to try and evoke the idea of symmetry. So it's a cross within a cross, and it's divided dead in half. The paint is dragged this way on this half and this way on this one. Sort of in synergy, partnership, hands helping hands, that sort of thing. Simon of Cyrene was just a pilgrim, you know, a Passover pilgrim who happened to be in the neighbourhood, was standing nearby, and he probably got shoulder tapped, I guess, you know. But yeah, just trying to evoke the idea of partnership. Again, I repeat the target image here. I think I did, yeah, there as well. Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. This is sort of a bit of Catholic mythology, I suppose. I put lots of fabric on. There's hessian here and muslin and sort of type stuff here. I just wanted to make a painting that looked wet, I think, and veil-like and shroud-like or something. And so I just kept putting the paint on until I could stand it. And that's what we ended up with. I sort of understand why this is in the Stations, because the Stations is really a story that starts out bad and ends up a whole lot worse. And there aren't many opportunities or examples of human compassion and care and gentleness. And this painting allows for that. And some people probably look and say, oh, it's not historically accurate, Derek. Shouldn't be in there. I sort of think, oh, does it matter? It's like if you're playing a blues song, if you play a 12-bar blues, Dan will know more about this than me, playing a 12-bar blues, the chord changes are kind of predictable. Like if you hear Eric Clapton play a 12-bar blues, the chord changes happen perfectly. But if you listen to some of the old cats like John Lee Hooker, he makes the chord changes on a blues song when it feels right. So you can say, well, that's not very musically accurate, John Lee Hooker, but emotionally, it's kind of spot on. And so this brings an emotional accuracy, perhaps, to the story, where we get an opportunity to see, in the context of such incredible violence and abuse and dehumanization and cruelty and torture, we get to see a moment of human compassion and empathy and devotion. So I vote for it to stay. I'll take these off me. Jesus falls for the third time. The second time, sorry. This time I made him fall the other way because I could. No real reason. But the probability of him falling and stumbling would be incredibly high. Remember, Pilate had him whipped, scourged, before he sent him on his way, and those those whips, those long leather thongs, the tips of them were no doubt loaded with, leaden balls or bits of bone or steel or whatever. And there are references in the Old Testament as to scourging. It might be in Deuteronomy. They say 40 times less one. Now that's Jewish law, not Roman law, so the laws don't apply to the Romans. But needless to say, Jesus was probably whipped to within an inch of his life, because that's the way they did things. And it was determined that any more than 40 lashings, you could kill a person. And they liked to extend the agony, so I don't know how they came to the 39 conclusion, trial and error, I guess. The probability of him stumbling and falling obviously would be super high. Again, the downward arrows to suggest the falling idea. There's a lot of dripping going on in the background. Again, complementary colours. Red being the complementary of blue. Jesus meets the women of Jerusalem. This was the toughest one for me. And this is the one I put off till the end, hoping that some good ideas would come in the interim, and they didn't really. But I'll read you the scriptural context, because I'm still really confused about it all. And I think the painting might be a bit of a cop-out, but a huge crowd of this is Simon of Cyrene's taken up the cross on Jesus' behalf. A huge crowd of people followed along with the women weeping and carrying on. At one point, Jesus turned to the women and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, don't cry for me, cry for yourselves and for your children. The time is coming when they'll say, 'Lucky the women who never conceived. Lucky the wombs that never gave birth. Lucky the breasts that never gave milk.' Then they'll start calling to the mountains, 'Fall down on us,' calling to the hills, 'Cover us up.' If people do these things to a live green tree, can you imagine what they'll do with dead wood?" Now, I'm not a theologian. Talk to Alison about this afterwards, or Mark Pearson. I'm assuming he's saying there will be a time when Jerusalem will be ransacked and overthrown. And at that time, you'll be glad you didn't have to worry about your children. That's my take on it. And I just got these amorphous sort of pink things with dribbles coming up below them. They could be women. And I've got the baby blue cross on this side. So it's all a bit cliched, I know, but that's the best I could come up with. There's living stuff, there's dying stuff on either side of a tower cross. So that was that. The final fall. What can I tell you about this? Here's a good case in point of doing what the painting needs, just because the painting needs it, not because you're trying to advance the narrative or the story. I'd sort of finished it and I thought it needs something up here to sort of, because I've got the letter on the black and the writing on the black, the number on the black, writing on the black. It needs something here. And I thought, I'll just get some black spray paint. It dries fast. And so I squirted it on there, and this middle dribble was running at a rate of knots, and these ones weren't catching up. And I wanted more than one dribble. But I needed these to catch up, so I quickly put it up flat. And I went and got my hot air gun, fired that up, put it back on the vertical, and trained the gun on the middle dribble to try and coax it to stop while these two caught up. And in the process, you see I've scorched the painting a little bit? That's all. That'll cost you a bit more. Anyway, number 10, Jesus is stripped of his garments. There's a song on my last album. It starts out, he awoke to a world drained of colour, lit a smoke and drank his coffee dry. He walked out into the day, pulled up his collar. The rain fell in sheets from the sky. Or a bit of a grim start to a song. It's my specialty. But this is kind of like a world drained of colour. It's a landscape that's been stripped. And there's obviously this was an old denim shirt that was past its use by. And I think the way I worked to get things done is I would have come up with this idea fairly early on and glued and stapled this onto the board, just saturated it in PVA glue and stapled it to the board, and I would have put it aside for a week or two and come back to it, but I know that that's sort of underway. So obviously this is a fairly overt reference to clothing, and the landscape is this almost fresh pink, stripped thing. The sky is kind of almost nothing. The letters and even the numbers are kind of stripped out and difficult to read. And that was that. Number 11, Jesus is nailed to the cross. This is fairly self-explanatory, really. All the usual symbolism. There's quite a lot of texture on the back. That would be grout mixed in with paint. And these splatters, which I've sort of glazed over so it sits them back. And the blood from the wounds is sitting right on the front. Again, what's happening in the heavenlies? I don't know what's happening. I think heaven's kind of exploding. Yeah, that's that one. This one, Jesus dies. I thought I'd finished this one. I was working on this one at the time, and this one was on the other side of the studio drying. And in the process of splattering this one, the blue paint somehow crossed the room and went on this one. And I thought, oh, I'm liking that. So to complete it, I just put a blue line across the top, a flat line, just to suggest death. It had to be blue, really, to match the splatters. And so I quickly went and did some research to try and find a heart monitor that had a blue line running across it so that I knew I'd be medically accurate. I think I did eventually, but I might be stretching the truth. Again, it's just heavily scored white paint over gold. Gold is symbolic of heaven or the divine, hence the gold halo. I don't use metallic paints too much. They're quite tricky. They sit right on the surface of the painting, but you'd barely know it here. And then this here, I'm using something that's got a notched edge on it to expose the red underneath this sort of blue-black that I've just scraped down. That's that. 13, Jesus is taken down from the cross, is a mirror image of two. So if you put them side by side, the cross is completed. So it's just reversed out. It's not obviously a mirror image, but it's a reverse image. And it's just got a bit of a different vibe. Again, the tukutuku panel sort of idea. Instead of a dark half cross, we've got a light one. Yeah. And finally, sorry, I've gone on for so long. Jesus is laid in the tomb. The cross is on its side. INRI, INRI, is the Latin anagram of Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And it's a fairly moody, skyish thing going on in the background. I put this hessian in here to imply, Jesus' body wrapped and entombed. And a bit of gold leaf action up the top, indicating the heavenly. That's it. Any questions? I should have said at the beginning, if you've got any questions, just feel free to interject, or any comments. If you've got any brutal and harsh criticism, you can keep those to yourself, but I'll take anything else. Any questions? Before I hand... like I said, it's a hard story, and it's not a story that is suited to pretty pictures, but it has a very happy ending. But you'll have to pledge to come to church next Sunday to find that out. So there is a catch, yes. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you very much, Derek. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your process with us. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. We are going to finish with a blessing, and then there's more food. If you would like to have some lunch with us, that will be lovely. It's going to be out there, or just sit around and chat, or go and ask your questions privately to Derek if you'd like to, or just chat with him. So let's pray. Jesus, you walked the Via Dolorosa, the path of suffering, with courage and determination, and with great love. You walked this path so that whatever paths we walk, you can walk them with us. We pray for courage. We pray for determination to persevere when life is hard. And we pray for love, for your love, to fill our heart and mind and spirit and flow through us to those around us. May your Easter be blessed with love, with significance, and with peace. Amen.